Hello and welcome to What's Going with Owen and Maggie. I am Owen, and this is not Maggie. Maggie, unfortunately, has been pressed into service by the mighty cosmic tyrant Galactus and has become his new herald and is searching out new planets for him to destroy. But fortunately, emergency backup co-host Alan Kingsley is here. Hello, Alan.
Hey, and I am here. My surfboard is not nearly as cool as Maggie's.
No,
but,
not even close.
But
Yeah.
but I've decided to stay in tonight and and hang out with you all.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that. Why don't you tell everyone where you're from and what kinds of things you're into and everything. You are a podcaster on the UnSpoiled network as well.
I am actually a childhood friend is the wrong word. I knew Natasha in high school, and we randomly reconnected over Facebook. And eventually, when she started to grow the UnSpoiled network, she was looking for new people to co-host stuff with. And so for the last couple of years, I've been co-hosting with Natasha on and off. She and I did UnSpoiled True Detective, at least the first season of it. We just finished UnSpoiled Hannibal not too long ago. We're in the middle of UnSpoiled Justified right now. And through that, I've gotten to know you just like sort of here and there. You and I have never actually had a conversation before about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, this is our first time doing any kind of project together. We have just spoken like in brief 5-minute chunks, like before you and Natasha start or end on a podcast or something.
Yeah.
But I've always really enjoyed the shows that y'all have done. I only was able to listen to all of True Detective. I never finished the last season of Hannibal.
Oh, dude, you're missing out.
I know, I need to do that. The first handful of episodes were so weak that I was just like, meh.
Yeah, and I've actually run into a lot of people who were a big fan of the third season. It's their favorite season of the show. It's got, it's really where the show comes together. And I'm flabbergasted by that, quite frankly. The show gets better. The third season of the show is fantastic by the end. But yeah, those first couple episodes are rough. And I do not blame people for tuning out because they're just, it's very slow and it's very quiet. And Hannibal is always kind of a self-indulgent show. Oh, very like for all its other strengths.
Yeah,
and on the third season, the wheels kind of fell off the train. The wheels fell off, and it took them a while to screw them back on. So yeah, but that was it was still a fun show to do. It's a really cool show. I would definitely recommend go back to check it out. But yeah, I am on the UnSpoiled network. I'm there every week doing Justified right now, and I bop around Twitter. And for any UnSpoiled subscribers who are listening to this, you can find me in the UnSpoiled Clubhouse all the time, just chiming in on things, and that's where you find me. I don't know where that sentence was going, so that's me.
That sounds about right. Yeah, this will not be on iTunes for a while, probably not until Maggie and I get going and really build up a couple of episodes, probably. But I will eventually be posting this. If you're unfamiliar with UnSpoiled, that is a podcast run by my girlfriend and various co-hosts, Alan being one of them, where one of the hosts is completely unfamiliar with the series they're covering, and one of the other hosts usually knows all about it. So that it's very fun to have one person who's in the know and one person is like speculating on what's going to happen, and the other person can just kind of go, I don't know, maybe that is what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of my job is sort of lording it over her that she has no idea what's coming. And yeah, it's a bright spot in my week sometimes. So
nice. So like we said, we have not really gotten to talk much. So I don't know if you've watched any episodes of this, but
I tuned in really briefly last week for you and Miles for about a half hour, and then I had to bail, unfortunately.
Yes. Well, we were probably very, very in the nitty of the New Warriors.
It's a group I know nothing about other than Speedball became penance after blowing up some children.
That's true.
So that's the extent of my New Warriors.
That's knowledge. The worst thing you could know. But you know that I'm super into comics and Star Wars and some video gaming. I believe, did we talk about you playing Fallout?
Yes. Fallout? I have played the very first Fallout.
That's a good one.
And yes, and I have the second Fallout, and I've monkeyed around with it a little bit. And then Fallout got super popular, and everyone was talking about it, and I haven't played that one. which is sort of the story of my life, it seems.
Yeah, two is my favorite, actually.
That's I heard it was a lot of people's favorites, but they were each $4.99 or something on GOG.com, and so I decided to start with the first one, and then that was as far as I ever got.
Yeah, the first one the first two have better writing in general than any of the newer ones, and then one is good, but you can tell that they spent a lot of their energy just like figuring out what Fallout is and like establishing the world. Two is much more of them like getting to really play with those pieces.
Okay. And
it's a much bigger game. The first one is I'm replaying it right now actually, and I'm just like, wow, if you know what you're doing, this is a very, very short game.
That's the thing I could never figure out, because I feel like I got really close to the end of it, but I'm not positive because I never actually invested the time to finish. But I had to restart it several times because I would just wind up in a location where I just felt hopelessly outclassed. And I'm like, I think I'm all the way through this, except for, I don't know. I don't imagine how much more could there possibly be, but I never actually figured that out. I was just always really happy. I loved the customization, and I loved you could play with the intelligence of your characters, and you'd get different dialogue options and things like that. And I love they got Richard Dean Anderson to do voice. So he's
Richard Dean Anderson. He's Killian Darkwater, right?
Sure. I trust you on that.
The guy from Junktown.
He's the guy in Junktown. Yes.
Yeah. MacGruber. God, MacGyver.
Yes, MacGyver was one of my childhood heroes, and so pretty much anything that Richard Dean Anderson does, I owe it to myself at least to check it out. So I was excited to see him show up there because I had no idea. Yeah, that game, like, it was in that weird era of PC games where voice acting was this thing that you could do, and it wasn't like a thing where you'd have to pay a star like a ton of money. Like it's got Ron Perlman in it, which Is that right?
Yeah, he's the narrator for the intros in the first three actually, and he plays a couple of NPCs also, so it's just cool. They got that. They've got damn it, you've seen Pitch Black, right?
Sure.
Keith David, that's his name. Keith David plays a guy.
He's awesome. I love when he shows up with stuff.
Man, Keith David, I could go on about that man's voice for ages.
He's up there. He's underrated. He gets overshadowed by people like Morgan Freeman, who's like, yes, his voice is fine. I get it. We all like it. But yeah, Keith David's someone that people forget about, and they shouldn't, damn it.
I always thought that Keith David should have been Smaug.
Oh, yeah.
I could definitely see the voice of a dragon. They picked Benny Cumberbund, and I was just like, what?
Yeah, for all the failings of the Hobbit movies, of which there are many, I thought the scene with Bilbo and Smaug was exactly right. I thought they did it fantastically. I was really pleased with it. But it's also just never the way I've exactly pictured him. There was definitely a lot more baritone or a lot more bass in my head.
Yeah. So I might have to check those scenes out because I couldn't get past the first movie. But I do really love all the stuff with the dragon and
I was so horribly, horribly, horribly disappointed in the third movie. I didn't have all that much invested in them. The Hobbit is one of my very favorite books of all time, hands down. I've read it more times than I could count. I love The Hobbit. The movies, I was so confused as to why they were going back. But I got hooked on a podcast. Well, I know, but I didn't want to believe that, honestly. I refuse to believe Peter Jackson does not have all the money he will ever need for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And I think the movies would have been better served if he was the producer like he was supposed to be. And, a Del Toro or somebody equally interesting taking the helm. But I think by the time that he dropped out, they were so far down the road that they kind of had to keep going, and he agreed to pick it up. Anyway, my whole take on the movies got colored. I also listened to a ton of podcasts, way, way, way too many.
Me too.
And are you familiar by any chance with the Tolkien professor, Corey Olson?
No, I don't think so. I listened to one Tolkien podcast briefly, and I like the movies, and I like the idea of the books, but I find them a little hard to get into, as I have a very short attention span. It's not that I don't think it's worth doing, it's just that it's not always for me. I listened to this podcast, and the premise of it was basically like almost history lessons.
Okay.
That, but I think it might have been called like something related to the Silmarillion or something.
Yeah, the Silmarillion's even tougher. That's a history book for stuff that never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Tolkien Professor podcast started out, he's an actual like college professor, and his major area of focus are like Tolkien studies. And he wanted to do college level, essentially online college courses of Tolkien's work, starting with The Hobbit, and that's how I first got into it. But after a while, that got way off track, and they turned into this thing that started out as like a small section of the podcast, turning into the entire thing called Riddles in the Dark. And it was him and two co-hosts in the years leading up to when the movie started, once they knew they were filming and everything, trying to figure out how you turn The Hobbit into 2 movies, later on 3 movies, because that happened.
Well, and you raid the appendices of Return of the King, as it turns out.
And the show was fascinating, even after the movies came out, and the first one came out, and it wasn't great. I didn't think it was awful, but it wasn't great. And rather than dismiss it out of the hand and go, "Ugh, that sucked," they took it and said, like, all right, well, let's look at what they're trying to do. And it was really interesting just for them to take all these different aspects and things that you might dismiss as just out of hand. It's like, that's a stupid change. And just gonna say, like, okay, but why did they make that change? Let's really dive into it. And by the time we got to the 3rd movie, I was interested academically in what they were going to do. The story I really could care less about. I had already just kind of figured out, okay, they've messed with this enough where it's not going to be anything that's going to, I'm not going to be moved by this movie. I've gotten that down already. No question in my mind. This movie isn't going to end up on my DVD shelf. This is just something that is more curiosity. Exactly.
Yeah. Which,
exactly.
I mean, I go and see, most comic book movies sometimes for that reason.
I'm getting there with those. Yeah, that movie was. You saw it? I thought we talked about it when it came out. Oh yeah, I saw it opening night, and I didn't hate it the way that I think most people hated it. When I saw it, like the night that I saw it, I had significant issues, and I said, these people's conceptions of these heroes are not mine. Mm-hmm. But there were things I thought were really interesting. I really liked the concept of Superman, this guy showing up out of nowhere who is a god. I love, by the way, as much as I've really come to resent Zack Snyder's idea of who Superman is, I love that the movies choose to show Superman's powers the way a normal person sees them. So when Superman, when he can move faster than a speeding bullet, what does that look like to a normal person? It looks like he takes off like a shot with like a sonic boom. I love that they do that stuff. I think that stuff is really, really cool. Yeah. And this guy shows up, and Bruce Wayne, who is already, super paranoid, super protective. I love the idea of him getting really, really concerned over what can this guy possibly do. Yeah. And especially, this is in my head, what I was hoping the movie was going to. And Lex Luthor pulling all of these strings to get Batman more and more and more and more paranoid and push him closer and closer and closer to the edge of making this mistake. And I love the idea of Batman, after 20 years of doing this, getting to the point where he is branding criminals. Like, he doesn't have to be shooting people. That was when I went like, oh, that's stupid. But the idea of him getting to the point where he is so pissed at this life that he has chosen to live and the fact that the city isn't getting better, that he's starting to go over the edge. He is starting to put Batman brands on criminals, which is doing them no favors in prison. And then, I don't know, I like that idea of Batman as antagonist for this movie with Lex Luthor behind the scenes when no one can see it. And for about the first 2/3 of the movie, I was willing to forgive an awful lot. Mm-hmm. And then the movie went the way it went, even before all the Martha horse shit.
It's funny because I didn't see the movie, but them bonding over having a mother with the same name is one of the only ideas that people were kicking around as being like the worst things about the movies that I was actually like, oh, I like that.
Well, see, but this is the thing. That is the thing that you realize when, that was going to sound really pejorative, and I don't mean it that way. I'm going to say it anyway, though. Like when you're 12 and you go, did you ever notice Batman and Superman mothers have the same name? That's so weird. Imagine if they were fighting and they're just like Martha, and like that's what stops them fighting. That would be so cool. Yeah. But then to be an actual adult screenwriter. Yeah. And that is the crux of your movie.
Yeah.
is
well, and everyone, both Batman and Superman, have been so like easily led on to this stupid conflict by Lex Luthor that it reminds me hearing about it like Anakin being tricked by the Emperor into becoming evil in like 5 seconds. It's like, I tricked you. Now you're going to kill children. And then having it be that if it had been like they didn't trust each other and then they kind of were able to bond or something like that. But from the sounds of it, the execution is what's bad on that. I actually kind of like it. I think it could be done well, I guess.
Well, I think it could. No, I don't agree with you.
That's fine.
So I think conceptually it's interesting, but that's as far as I'll go. But no, the other issue. So now, did you not see the movie?
Batman v Superman?
Yeah.
I have no desire. I will
That's
see it
fair.
someday. I might see it on a plane, but
I think you owe it to yourself to check it out, just kind of cause. But it is, don't spend your money or time that could be better spent doing anything else on it.
Honestly, I think I'll see it after, because I think the DC cinematic universe, for lack of a better term, they call it something else to act like they're not trying to ape Marvel, but they totally are. When it fails and when they decide to do something new, I might go back and like hate watch it, because I mean I'm not against watching bad superhero movies. I watch Batman and Robin like once a year and get shit faced. Like it's a great drinking movie.
I suppose
I would rather watch a goofy movie like that, like a bad comedy, than a bad drama, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair most of the time. Sometimes you get The Room, and that's worth it.
Yeah, it is.
And that is a drama technically. They've tried to spin it. If you look at the DVD, like, come check out this amazing black comedy. Like, that's not a black comedy. That's what the movie. That's why The Room is an amazing. It's like the third movie I've jumped to without finishing a story. But that's why The Room is such an amazing movie, because everyone in it is so invested in it in a completely serious way. That's not a black comedy. That's just a bad drama.
It's amazingly bad. But we digress. Okay, so we'll try and peel back the layers of this inception that we have drawn for ourselves. right now we're in the sick bed. We need to get back to the snowy mountain compound of Batman v Superman.
Yes. All right. So snowy compound of Batman v Superman. Yeah, the Martha thing. Okay, so the Martha thing is interesting, I guess. But
what killed the movie for you? Was it that?
Yes, because that's a line, that's a sequence where people laugh out loud in the theater, especially that like that's just it. Your theater can't do that. But for me personally, it is that they're building up this fight. And again, I like, at least conceptually, the idea of Batman being driven to just such intense paranoia over this guy. And a Batman who's already on the edge and who has already had everything taken from him. But
as much as I don't like, sorry to interrupt, as much as I don't like what Man of Steel did with Superman, it was really the only direction you could have gone after you have this version of Superman who's not the Boy Scout. He's just a guy who, has this godlike power and maybe doesn't use it in the most reassuring way. I think that's actually a good idea. Like, for once, Batman being paranoid about Superman makes a lot of sense after a movie like Man of Steel, where, Superman is dangerous and isn't good at controlling his power.
Yeah, and I gave, and this is not the tangent for tangent's sake, this is me actually sewing something up here. Man of Steel, I cut a lot of slack because that's a movie about Superman's first day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I'm okay with that.
It when I saw it.
Yeah, and I was okay with it depending on how they were going to address it in this movie. I later became less okay with it when I realized our idea of Pa Kent went from the man who taught Superman his values to the guy who said, maybe you should let children drown. And I couldn't get past that.
I think everything that's wrong with Superman in those movies hinges on that interpretation of Pa Kent.
Yeah, and again,
without that, you don't get the non-heroic Superman, the Superman who is selfish, the Superman who listens to his mom when his mom says, "You don't owe these people a thing."
Yeah, and actually, I really like Kevin Costner's performance also. I just hate everything about the direction they put the character in.
It's not Kevin's fault.
Right. But, the Superman thing... there were a few things. First, the fight, since we already started talking about the fight. they're being driven together by Lex Luthor, closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to fight. But that's not what pushes them to fight. What pushes them to fight is Lex Luthor kidnaps Lois Lane and tells Superman, "You need to go kill Batman."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Wait, what?" Like that's all the manipulation. I even like Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. I thought it was cool. It's completely different from anything they've ever done before. It's insane, but I really dug it. I thought it was just such an interesting decision. Instead of a cold, calculating mastermind, just a batshit insane, kid genius. I was kind of with it, but I hated the fact they changed the whole reason that they were driving them to fight. So that made no sense. But then there was also Superman as Batman killing, of course. That's not cool. But Superman as God, as the God figure, they pushed that so hard, and even
in the trailers, it was something that really turned me off.
Yeah, and I'm okay with exploring that part of who Superman is, because that makes a lot of sense to me, that's how part of the world would react. But nothing in this movie shows. I think you actually said at one point in the podcast I was listening to, any movie where your Superman doesn't smile means you're not doing Superman right.
Yeah. Any Superman movie that you can't take your 8-year-old to see.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can take an 8-year-old to see either. Like even Man of Steel, like there's a lot of neck snapping and
pretty intense
and brooding.
Yeah. But it's but in this movie, at no point in this movie did anybody show me why anyone should like Superman. And Superman is a likable person. He just is. And I think building on that same point, the DC universe is terrified of calling their characters Superman and Batman.
Yeah.
They don't want to do. There's a reason he's called the Bat of Gotham. He's been around for 20 years. Who still calls him the Bat of Gotham? Call him fucking Batman. But they're terrified of the word Batman leaving anybody's mouth, just like Superman. They don't want to call him that. They do everything in their power to avoid saying it, because they think it sounds goofy. They think it sounds goofy. But there's a way to do it. Marvel has shown you, if you can say Captain America with a straight face, Marvel's Captain America is who DC Superman ought to be. They've shown you how to do that character, so suck it up and do it. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I think another big part of it is, Marvel made it work, but they did, they showed their work and they put in the time. You started with Iron Man, who is, the fact that it wasn't seen until like 2007, that Iron Man is like one of the most easy to sell American characters. Is amazing. And then they slid their way in there. They didn't start with Captain America, who's one of the cheesier ones. They started with Iron Man. They did Hulk, who everyone knows and is very straightforward, and they just kind of built up to the goofier things, to the point where now they can do Guardians of the Galaxy and the Vision and just goofy weird stuff, because they put in the time. And DC went, yeah, we've done Batman for years. We'll do a very muted, self-serious Superman, and then get right back into doing Batman stuff again.
Yeah. Well, I was really excited about their initial plan to do a Justice League movie first and then splinter it off into solo films. Essentially just do the reverse of the Marvel Avengers formula thing. And obviously it's a desperate ploy to not look like they're copying Marvel. But something about it maybe just go like, I think that's fair. If you really think you can construct a movie that gives, 6 people or whatever enough time to shine to where audiences will be invested, not even audience invested, you have an audience already. For all of those people, you'd have an audience. But if you were able to do that, I don't know. I liked the idea of them putting a team together and then letting them go off and do their own solo thing. Something about it appealed to me, but I think that they just abandoned the idea so quickly that it would be like, oh, they really don't know what they're doing at all. They just decided to do the opposite of what Marvel wanted to do.
Yeah.
Until it got hard or until it got uncertain. Iron Man was a shock hit, but I've been reading comics since I was 9 years old, and I went to see Iron Man on a Tuesday, like a week and a half after it came out, because my friend wanted to. I had no investment in that. Marvel had no idea that this was going to work like this. Like, they took a big risk, and DC seems to want to take 0 risks.
Yeah. And I think, Warner Brothers, I say Warner Brothers, I think DC in general, because I think it extends to the comics sometimes too, they don't always know what they have on their hands. I don't think they get their properties the way Marvel does.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
like I don't think the people doing the DC movies get what makes the characters that they have great. Like Marvel seems to really get like their movies are like their comics, whereas I feel like Warner Brothers is going backwards and trying to make their comics more like gritty, serious movies.
I was just listening to. I know you've mentioned in other areas that you listen to Rachel Miles explain the X-Men.
Yeah, it's Jay and Miles explain the X-Men.
Yes. I'm sorry. That's right.
Yeah. You're listening to back episodes.
I've been going through their back catalog. Yeah.
And I make the same mistake.
I'm up to like episode 90. Like I've been going for forever.
Nice.
It's ever since I got my iPhone for the very first time, like 6 months ago, and found out they have a podcast app that lets you play things on 1.5 speed. It's been my best friend.
Nice.
But in that show, they did like a giant crossover thing with 8 other podcasts.
That was so great.
It was.
That I don't think they'll ever do it again because from the sounds of it, it was a logistical nightmare. Yeah. But listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about, go on your iTunes or whatever and search for Secret Convergence on Infinite Podcasts, in which 9 comic book podcasts came together and did a crossover. It's so great.
It's a lot, and they just, instead of doing whatever their normal show is, they just have a couple people from each show on, and they do like panel discussions about who would win in a fight or what's the best like superhero redesign, or they do cool stuff like that.
Hey, who would win in a fight, the Punisher or the Silver Surfer? What if the Punisher had a bazooka?
Yeah, I think they did that in an episode, in an issue.
So great.
It's a whole lot of fun. But one of the co-hosts from one of those shows in one of those crossover episodes talked about the idea of DC. Wow, thoughts just gone, poof, like it never was there. See, there's Batman. Oh yes, that's what it was. They were talking about DC's comic book movies, and essentially, they got so. They got like PTSD from Batman and Robin, and the idea of them doing another goofy superhero movie ever for the rest of time has gotten them terrified. And so now their movies can't be. And then they did Green Lantern, which I didn't think was terrible, but wasn't great.
It was real bad, but part of that I think it was just because it was so rushed.
Yeah,
the problem wasn't that it was goofy. The problem was that they just didn't give it the care it needed. A rewrite on that script and a couple more months for the CGI effects, that could have been better.
Yes,
but I always forget about Green Lantern being like a DC movie that they did. They tried. And they right again. And
they tried to let it be light and funny, and they failed again. And now they are terrified of the idea of doing a movie with any kind of levity to it. It's really it's sad because comic books are goofy. They just are.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
And you need to embrace it.
Fandom. Like it's not just DC that has this problem. It's the whole fan base. And not the whole fan base, but a large amount is just people who really like this thing that's kind of goofy, and so they try and compensate with it. And so you get, so many comics trying to be The Dark Knight Strikes Again, not The Dark Knight Strikes Again. I always get those names mixed up. Not the terrible sequel.
I was going to say, no comic wants to be The Dark Knight Strikes Again.
But The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, which are good, or you've got like The Killing Joke, which are good but problematic, and then you have dozens and dozens and hundreds. You've got your identity crises. And stories like that are trying to be serious so hard, and just like, let's put a bunch of rape and arm ripping in all of these comic books. When I read Identity Crisis, I really, really loved it. I really was, I was shocked at how much. I don't know. I thought it was really, really powerful. And since then, I have just heard people rip on it and rip on it and rip on it. So I really feel like I've got to go back and read it again. Please, because it's very similar to Watchmen. I feel like Brad Meltzer read Watchmen and it was like, okay, this is how you do comics.
Okay.
But he didn't invest the kind of craft, and maybe doesn't have the ability to into it. Like Watchmen is a deconstruction, whereas I feel like Identity Crisis is trying to say, no, this is what DC Comics is now.
Yeah,
it's about a whole lot of rape. And
I do remember at the time somebody saying that, you know, that's their big thing that they really want to slap you in the face with, is that they raped Sue Dibney, and the response was, I want to get it right, and I'm pretty sure I have it, but it was something to the effect of, yeah, but nobody cares about Sue Dibney. You want to get me invested, rape Lois Lane, and then make a story about that. Now, I don't know that I want to see that, but I understand their point. It's just kind of like, we're going to make North Star the gay X-Men. Go like, North Star? Really? That's your go-to guy to really represent stuff?
Yeah. The member of Alpha Flight, not even the leader of Alpha Flight, just one of the guys in Alpha Flight.
And if I remember correctly, he's the guy in Alpha Flight who quits all the time.
Probably. So, I didn't read any North Star ever until about a year or two ago. I like North Star.
I actually have no. I have very little context for it.
Did you ever read the original Giant Size X-Men when they unveiled the team?
Yeah.
Do you remember Sunfire, the Japanese guy who's an asshole?
Of course.
And
who leaves the next day? Yes. Yeah.
He's basically like Sunfire.
Okay.
He's just a complete blowhard kind of jerk. But
I'm all right with that.
Okay, so clearly you also are into comics.
Yeah.
What did you read when you were younger? Like, what are you really into comics-wise?
My very first comic, well, honestly, it was all kind of scattered. My very first comic, we went to Cape Cod with my grandparents when I was probably 9 or 10 maybe. It was me, my brother, and my cousin Greg. My cousin Greg has always been cooler than me, and that used to bother me, but now, you know, I've come to terms with it. So they said, do you want to go into this comic book shop? And Greg said, yeah, let's go. Comics are cool. And I went, oh, okay, comics are cool. Great. And so they bought each of us a comic. My brother got an ElfQuest comic, which is still the only issue of ElfQuest I've ever read.
I think Maggie is super into ElfQuest.
I know it's a big deal, but yeah, I never got around to it. Mine, though, was Green Lantern #6. It was Emerald Dawn, the one where Hal Jordan goes into the battery.
Nice.
And
this is after Hal went crazy after Coast City was destroyed?
No. This was actually, I believe this is right after Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, relaunching everything.
Yeah.
And that was
he's got the Gray Temples?
Yes. Right. And it's the end of the very first story arc. I think it's right after Crisis, and he goes into the battery and to come out superpowered to defeat whatever the hell it was. I don't even remember that much, but it totally captivated me. And right when I got into it, like for real, was not too much longer. It was right around the death of Superman, and that brought me in, like a lot of people. And I followed that, and we had a local comic book shop in the center of Wallingford, was my hometown in Connecticut, and that shop was right in the very center of town, had giant glass windows around the corner. It was right in the corner in the center of town, and somebody had painted a mural of heroes and villains on it. It was so cool. When that shop,
like a great job.
It was on. You know, I heard later the guy who ran it was kind of a jerk, but as a kid, it was like Wonderland.
Yeah. And if that's like mid '90s, that was kind of during the boom.
It was. It absolutely was. Yeah, I was one of the guys who had Superman #75 in the black sealed plastic bag with the armband. Actually, I opened mine because I didn't know you weren't supposed to open it.
No, you made the right call. As it turned out, you were more right than you knew.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad.
But we went into that shop, and I said, yeah, I kind of want to start doing this. I don't really know what I'm doing. And so me and my dad went to the guy at the counter, and he goes, well, what do you like? And I'm like, I don't know, Superman, Batman, the X-Men, this, that. And he went, all right. And so we got a couple of them, and I came back a week later, and he had saved like a dozen books. He put them all on a pull list for me. And I'm like, this is like, in 1992 dollars, this is like $15. I don't have this. But it got me reading a whole bunch of stuff, and it was right when I feel like they started to get really complicated. At least it felt that way. Yeah. But it was also in the aftermath of the death of Superman. I was right there for the reign of the Supermen. And
I maintain that Reign of the Superman is better than you think.
I think it's cool. I have it in trade paperback now.
It's a cool idea. It plays with some of the ideas that you were talking about with Batman versus Superman, the whole Superman would be seen as a god by some people. Like that's a subplot through that. I read Death and Return of Superman probably about 6 or 7 years ago. For the first time on a road trip. I just powered through the whole thing, which that's like 30 some odd issues.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's better than you would think it is. It starts real dumb and gets a lot better.
Yeah, I was really I still think that the 7 issues of Doomsday, again, it totally rose-colored glass nostalgia. But I still think that they are fun issues to read, and I like that the books get like fewer and fewer panels per page until you get to Superman 75, where there's literally one panel on every single page of the book, and it's just splash page after splash page after splash page. And then Funeral for a Friend, I think, is pretty good too, with the DC Universe reacting to all this stuff. And as a kid, Reign of the Supermen was fun. It was me and my brother, and he was less into it than I was. He was my younger brother, and so I think I had to talk to someone about it. But we would pick which Superman we thought was the coolest and which one was going to be the replacement, and like we would have real conversations about it. And it was entertaining. But right at the same time, to not go too far down a path without finishing yet another story, it was at the same time as Emerald Twilight, which is when Coast City gets destroyed, Hal Jordan goes insane, murders all the Green Lanterns, and steals all the rings. Which I
maintain that's still the most interesting Hal Jordan has ever been.
It is. He is actually a character that, again, when I was a kid, probably a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was my first comic book.
Sure.
He was my dude when I was a kid, and then now that I'm like, yeah, Hal's kind of...
My first superhero was the original Marvel Captain Marvel.
Which like Marvel?
Yeah.
Really?
I had a trade paper that was back when trade paperbacks were not a thing. My dad had a trade of that, and it was like the Jim Starlin stuff, real cool 70s artwork and everything. But the fact of the matter is, Captain Marvel is fucking milquetoast. Like, he is maybe the least interesting person to have the name Captain Marvel, and there's about 20 of them. So I know where you're coming from. From on there, even though I hate Hal Jordan.
Well, let me ask you, and actually, let me just say real quick. So, again, as a kid, my very first comic book was Emerald Dawn, where he goes into the Battery and becomes Super Green Lantern to save the day. And pretty much the next time I encounter the Green Lantern, he goes and is murdering the Green Lanterns, goes back into the Battery, kills all the little blue guys, and takes off into space as like God Emperor Hal.
Yeah.
And
that was with awesome shoulder pads.
Yes, it was pretty traumatic. And but actually one of the things, and I'd mentioned off the air, I was like, I don't really know how this show works, but I had something that I was thinking about and having conversations about. And I was talking with a coworker of mine about Riri, what's her name, who's taken over for Tony Stark in Marvel continuity now.
Yeah, I don't know the whole deal on this, so you'll have to clue me in.
I actually don't either. I'm not reading Civil War II. It feels like, let's be real, all comic stuff is tie-ins to whatever, but it feels like such a cheap grab for for viewers and whatever to piggyback off the movies.
I was going to, because the first issue came out right when we were going to start doing the show.
Okay.
And I picked up the first issue. I had read the Zero Free Comic Book Day tie-in issue, which was terrible. But I pick up the first issue. I'm looking through it. I'm like, I should really do this. I should know things. And then I see like page 1. They're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be in on this if the Inhumans are involved. And I was like, yep, me neither. And I put it right back on the shelf.
Yeah, they are beating that Inhuman drum.
Stop it.
But yes, I don't really know what's going on. But Riri, I want to say it's Williams, but I don't know. Anyway, young African-American girl is now going to be Iron Man. And it got me thinking about, this is like the 8th major character that Marvel has gone and sort of, turned on its head to turn into something else. Mm-hmm. And I started having a conversation with one of my coworkers about other people who have taken up the monikers of other heroes. And if it's what is it about that exactly? Like, they keep doing it, and sometimes really interesting, and sometimes it's a total failure. And what are the good ones, and what are some of the really crappy ones? Like, there was a Ms. Marvel who was like a black woman in the late 80s for like 10
Monica
seconds.
Rambeau, way cooler than Carol Danvers.
Yeah, but like nobody remembers her. And
she's hanging around. She's got more prominence right now than she has for a while. She still doesn't get the respect she deserves. Yeah, she was in the 80s. You know, Marvel needed to keep that Captain Marvel name in their copyright. So they just pooped out a new hero. And for once, you know, really rare back then, they decided to have, you know, a woman of color, which other than Storm at the time, they really didn't have many.
Yeah.
So, you know, they made Monica Rambeau. She joined the Avengers right away, and she was actually the leader of the Avengers for a while.
Is that right?
Yeah, but she's always been a character that is just like, anytime they want to do something else with that Captain Marvel name, they'll just shut her off to the side. Right now, she's on the Ultimates team, which is a book that I keep meaning to read. I keep buying it and not reading it.
Now you're talking about. So now these Ultimates are different than the Ultimates from like Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Fantastic Four, Ultimate X-Men.
Right.
Right.
They're. Oh my God. Krista CS just said, what about all those blue and green women? And I don't know if that's a reference to Green Lantern, Green Arrow, but I choose to believe it is. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I really don't. I was going to say it's a Kree thing, and I'm just like, no, that's not right. I don't know what that's a reference to.
There was they did this run of Green Lantern, Green Arrow in the 70s when neither of those characters were popular, and they would like try and tackle social issues, which for the time it was very progressive and, you know, A+ DC for doing this. But going back and reading it, it's very cringe-inducing because, like, you know, Hal Jordan doesn't know that racism is a thing until, you know, an old black man says, hey, I see you out there fighting for the purple skins and the orange skins, but when was the last time you stood up for the black skins? Which is just we get another check mark in my Hal Jordan sucks list. Just that Hal Jordan is clueless that racism is a thing.
That's well, that and actually that led me to think of something else.
Matter Hal Jordan.
I just finished reading. It's part of why the conversation happened with my coworker. They collected a trade paperback called The Captain, which is from the 80s when Captain America gave up being Captain America.
Right, when he wore that black outfit.
Yes, which then became you and I have had previous conversations about U.S. Agent. He was another one when I was a kid that I thought was really awesome.
Fucking U.S. Agent.
Yeah, and I think it's just because I kind of wanted to like Captain America, but he wasn't cool, and U.S. Agent was super angry and didn't feel like he belonged anywhere, and it really spoke to like 12-year-old me. He wore lots of black, and he brooded a lot. And but it was this whole story where, Captain America, the government said, hey, we kind of own you. We own your suit, and we own the super soldier serum, and you enlisted, so you need to do what we say all the time. And so Captain America resigns, and they get a new guy to be Captain America.
And he kind of sucks at it.
Yeah, yes. And actually, it was, when rereading it, felt like a worse version of the Nightfall storyline that DC did with Batman years later. It's just kind of showing how the reason, like, Captain America isn't just anybody with a shield, it's Steve Rogers specifically, because this guy was, you know, can't quite carry the torch. But they also gave him a new sidekick. They gave him a new Bucky, who happened to be a black guy. And you can't call him Bucky, but they do for like 6 issues, excuse me. And then they have to retcon in a scene where somebody had come to him and said, hey, that's not cool.
That's not the thing that you should be calling him.
Yeah, and so they changed to Battlestar, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it was just like, ooh, that is, and he's got like the little, like the high neck collar thing, and just, it is really embarrassing. And it also very prominently features D-Man in like a serious role.
D-Man!
Which I've only ever seen him when they brought him back like in the last 10 years as like homeless and living in the sewer and half out of his mind.
D-Man is going to be an underdog redemption character.
Okay. Sure. I'd be curious to see how you managed to pull that off, but okay.
I mean, it's mostly just what it says on the tin. I think it's great.
But it's D-Man, who's like a brand new. It actually, that arc is where he becomes an Avenger, and he's like, oh god, that's not a shining moment of the Avengers at all. But it's him, and it's what's his name, who was Nomad, who is just a total jerk. It's really, I never knew much about him, but he spends the entire run, and it's like 18 issues, it's long, and just being an utter asshat. And the first appearance of Diamondback as a good guy, sort of. And it's just like this really weird collection of late 80s Captain America people, and he's sort of is this weird, like, walking after school special, and it was...
Yeah, Cap has been that for a large majority of his career.
Which is a shame, because when he's written right, he's phenomenal. And lately, I think he has been.
And I don't think that's necessarily the wrong way. It's definitely not the wrongest way to do Captain America. But it's not always the most interesting. I think he's almost as hard to do right as Superman.
He is. Oh, he definitely is. There's no question.
Very hard character to write.
There's no question. But it got me thinking about reading that arc where Captain America gets replaced by somebody else. And we were having a conversation about Beta Ray Bill replacing Thor, and then Thunderstrike in the 90s replacing Thor. And now they've been replacing Amadeus Cho as the Hulk and Jane Foster as Lady Thor. And
have you been reading any of the Lady Thor stuff?
No, but I have heard it's fantastic.
It's good. I don't do this. I bought it for the art, which is not a thing I have ever done, really. Okay. I'm not an art person, but it is one of the most gorgeous books I've ever read, and it's it's very accessible as far as the storytelling goes. Lady Thor is very likable. I read it for the articles.
Read it for the articles.
I feel like Jane Foster was a character who was just kind of a Silver Age love interest. Mm-hmm. Not much of a personality, I understand, but she has a pretty likable, cool dynamic with Odin is totally different. Thor's the Odin sons, which that's one thing I don't like about this is it gets very confusing to talk about what characters are what characters. Like, it's weird to me that Thor is an identity and a mantle you can just take up. That's problematic.
Actually, there's one of the board games I play. I'm a big board game guy, among many other things. One of my favorites is a deck building game called Marvel Legendary. And they released an expansion pack that has the base game has Thor. They released an expansion that has Lady Thor. It's just how they named the character, because you got to call her something. Mm-hmm. You can't just have two different characters in the game named Thor because, well, I guess you could, but they don't.
Super Thor.
Sure. Ms. Super Thor. That's not even. No, you should take away clothes for that. Anyway, but they called her Lady Thor, and fans of the game said, like, that's not cool, man. Why would you do that? You can't do that. That's degrading to her. That's taking her down a peg. And I agree 100%, except for, like, then what do you call her? She's Thor. It's like having more than one Captain Britain. And, if you're going to talk about the Captain's Britain, you have to differentiate them in some way.
Yeah. I definitely, there's of course lots of people who use, the hashtag not my Thor, that kind of mentality against it. But, it's like right now, Laura Kinney, X-23, is Wolverine.
Yes.
And, I've read some stories with her in it, and she's great. And I think it was a good choice. I feel like
the all-new Wolverine's very good.
I've read a few issues. It's great. And I think it was a good move for them to do, because more than a lot of the characters that they've replaced, I feel like they've done what they can with Wolverine.
Agreed. Yes.
And I'm someone who likes Wolverine when he's done well. He's, even though he's the most overrated X-Man, he's still one of my favorite X-Men. But it becomes this thing where if anyone still calls her X-23, people get mad.
Interesting.
And I find that a little obnoxious. Like, I get what they're trying to say. She's Wolverine now, give her her dues.
Yeah.
But also trying to act like calling Logan Wolverine is insulting. It's like, Logan was Wolverine for 40 years and is in all the movies and is on all of the T-shirts. He's still who I think of when I say Wolverine. It's it's the price of progress, and it's for the most part it's worth it, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's, and I agree, and that's kind of the conversation that's rattling around in my head afterwards, as we were talking about, they've kind of taken, it feels like every major character now, especially with Iron Man thrown in the mix as well. You have Sam Wilson as Captain America, and other Captain America too, Steve Rogers is back, but Sam Wilson as Captain America, you have Amadeus Cho as the Hulk, you have Just they've taken all of these other people and they've changed them around. And yeah, you're right. Probably most of them aren't going to stick. Eventually they're going to come back around. Bruce Banner is going to come back and be the Hulk, and they're going to do all that.
If Barry Allen is the Flash again, nothing will ever stick ever again.
Yeah, exactly. But if even one or two of them stick the way that the way that Carol Danvers is stuck is miserable. They haven't brought back Marvell, because why the hell would you? But even if one or two of them stick, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have all these different changes around. To have if X-23 replaces Wolverine, for the next 10 years, I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad thing to have all these different changes taking place and all these different versions of characters who maybe look a little bit. Well, I was just talking with a friend of mine who was over earlier, and he took his son and his daughter to go see the Ghostbusters, and they both loved it. Mm-hmm. But he was telling me when they went and saw Star Wars back in December, his daughter Scarlett was over the moon with it. And his son, who's a little bit older, he didn't like it the first time he saw it. The second time he saw it, he was totally into it. But he said, it took a lot of conversation about it and a lot of sort of talking about it. And the issue was when he saw it the first time, he didn't quite know who to identify with because there wasn't a white guy as the main character of the story.
Yeah.
There was an old man, there was a woman, and there was a black guy. And he didn't see any, and so the idea that, as a straight white guy, I got it pretty good. Most of the things I look at, I can identify with a character. And a lot of other people don't get that. And so now that there is some of this stuff that's also popping up, again, even if only one or two of them stick, it is kind of cool that other people people who aren't straight white guys get to look at comics and see something that they recognize. Even better if they are 7, 8, 9, 10 and are still trying to figure out what they believe, where they want to,
and I think
where they relate.
It's good for everyone because people should be able to learn to identify with Ray. Just because you're a white man, doesn't mean you can't identify with Finn and Ray.
Agreed, but
very important thing for people to learn to be able to do, and especially when you're a kid and you're not used to or encouraged to try to do that. I think it's really good that we're getting finally some things that are a little bit different, even if it's very slow going.
And actually, and Krista asked, what about Poe? And that's true. Poe is in the movie, but he's very, very supporting, honestly. And so, I guess maybe I discount him too quickly, but
Yeah. Well, and yes, Poe is mixed. I can't remember his ethnicity. I looked it up when he was playing Apocalypse because I was like, did they cast a white man to be Apocalypse?
He doesn't play that way, at least not to me. Okay, I don't see him and think of anything other than white.
I am very bad at recognizing ethnicities. Is that your lady who just joined?
That is my lady.
Hello,
hi, lady. We're talking
lady.
Comics.
Okay, so we have mostly ignored our segment stuff, which is fine.
Sorry.
I was going to ask you.
I ramble lots.
What all are you reading, kind of monthly at the moment?
Right now, monthly. I scaled a lot of my stuff way back because I went way overboard. But I am reading. I'm reading the Captain Americas, the Sam Wilson and the Steve Rogers, although I think an issue behind on both of them right now.
I read a little bit of the Sam Wilson stuff. I really like that outfit, and I like the tone of at least the first several issues, but I fell behind on it.
Well, I really like that he's a Captain America who takes sides on stuff.
Yeah.
He looks at it and decides that, no, this isn't cool, and I am going to speak about it. And people kind of go, Steve Rogers he would have found a middle ground, and he wouldn't. He goes, well, too bad. I'm not Steve Rogers, and this is wrong, and screw you.
And yet it never becomes a thing where he's like, he says he still respects Steve for doing that, but he says that's not the person I am, and that's okay too.
Yes, and I love them bringing in Misty Knight because who doesn't love a badass private detective with a bionic arm and an afro?
And D-Man, I was so excited when D-Man showed up as his trainer.
Oh, and also they brought back Capwolf in that series, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
Because Capwolf was another one from a kid. That's a comic book cover I remember having and loving and reading. It's like part 4 of 6 or something, and just going like, "This is amazing! Captain America's a werewolf."
Although, as Natasha pointed out, Wolfton America is a better name.
Wolfton America sounds like he should be a lord in the British countryside.
But, that's fair too.
But so I'm reading both caps. I'm reading the Uncanny Avengers, though I'm starting to wonder why. And I'm reading the all new, all different Avengers because my girlfriend and I both love Kamala Khan and anything she's in. She's so good.
Kamala Khan is the find of the century. She really is. There hasn't been a better character made this century, I don't think.
No question.
16 years. She's so good.
She's so much fun, and she's so she writes superhero fanfic in her spare time, which is just hysterical.
It's delightful.
Yeah. So we're reading all new, all different Avengers. We actually just got the 5th volume of Ms. Marvel, like the trade paperback volume just came out, and so we've been collecting those. I'm reading the Dark Tower comics that they've been doing for like 10 years now.
Okay.
And those continue to be really interesting because they aren't just straight reprints of the books.
Okay.
They do things just subtly differently, and they'll approach things in slightly different ways that I really, really enjoy. The Dark Tower is one of my all-time favorite stories. I'm so psyched that UnSpoiled is doing it. And so this is also, but it's also been really fun to read how they're interpreting it for comics because it's a lot of the same creative people around Stephen King without Stephen King actually having a hand in it. And those are fun. They're midway through drawing of the 3 right now.
Okay.
What else am I reading? Been reading the Mark Waid Archie stuff.
Okay. Mark Waid is really good, and I read the first issue. So
I love the Mark Waid. Never in my life have I thought I would want to read an Archie comic, and between that and Afterlife with Archie, I'm just like, this is really good.
Yeah.
When the hell did I get to a place where I think Archie is good? But Jesus, it is.
Yeah. It's Mark Waid. That's what it took. Mark Waid's
exactly.
Fucking
right. And Chris asked me what I thought about Idris Elba in the Dark Tower movie. I think he looks awesome. I'm concerned about the movie itself.
Oh, sure.
I did. If anybody has read all the Dark Tower books, I used to write movie reviews for a site called the Mutant Reviewers from Hell. And one of the things I did when they started the talking about doing a movie and started seriously talking about it is I did a series of articles talking about, all right, let's try this. How would you turn these into movies based on the structure that they have said they're going to use, which at the time was 3 movies and 2 TV series, like interspersed in between. And so I kind of went and broke down all the books, and I came to the conclusion that's really, really hard, if not impossible. And you're going to make changes that are going to piss people off.
I only read the first 2 books. I don't see how they could possibly. It does not seem like a story that is well suited to movies.
It's not, and it only gets worse. And I will not say more just in case there are people reading along with the podcast or whatever. The story gets weird, and it gets expansive, and it goes places that movies can't go, in my mind. I challenge them to do it right, and I challenge them to prove me wrong. But I look at the later books of the Dark Tower and just go like, they can't do it. Clearly, they just decided, they read the first 2 books and said, this would be fun. And she asked about Susanna Dean as well. And Susanna is, I think they could do Susanna really well, to be perfectly honest. I think that she's such a badass character. And I think she's got, the only thing that they might do is they have the issue of Odetta. And they kind of have to show that Odetta is useless, but nice. And Detta is exactly the kind of person needed in this journey, except for she's a viper. And Detta has this tendency to talk like a caricature black lady.
Yeah, that was the problem I had. I was listening to it in audiobook. The narrator was white, and I just couldn't do it. That's fair. But I like it only because they also point it out. They're not just doing it and thinking like, the reader will understand. Like they're pointing it out. Like, this is how this at some point in her back of her head, Odetta sees this, and this is how she is choosing to manifest this as like this weird black lady caricature. That is, that's where I see being the really scary part, I guess, about them trying to put that into a movie. I don't know how you do that on film, unless you just leave it out entirely, which is probably what they'll do, hopefully what they'll do. Although they've also just said that they just released somewhere that Eddie and Susanna won't be in the first movie. And, yeah, that's what I heard, which confuses me even further.
Well, especially because they're casting people who show up in like books 6 and 7. And they're talking about locations that are in much, much, much later books. Like they're clearly, they are using some of the conceits of the book that become clear when you've read the whole book. and they're taking it and running with it, which on one hand I applaud, but on the other hand, I want the story that I read to be the story I see up on screen. And as much as I'm a booster for the movie in general, it's almost at that point where it's more of a curiosity for me than something I'm becoming invested in, because I don't know. Yeah. And as far as Susanna in the context of Roland being black, I don't see it being a big deal. I really don't. I see she can put plenty of that onto Eddie. She can go the route of, Roland's and Uncle Tom or whatever. They can do other things. She can find plenty of reasons to transfer hatred onto Roland. Again, I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I haven't tried to. I kind of was able to put this to rest in my head when I did my article. Honestly, I just kind of said, you know what? This is going to be really hard. I've resigned myself to the fact it's a Stephen King movie. Most Stephen King movies I hate.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will find a link to what that are to the review that I read, or that I wrote rather. It's a 2-part article, but I'll find them and I will post them here. It really was. It was a lot of fun for me to write, and I got a lot of flack for it from some people. Some people absolutely loved it. Some people said, "What the hell were you thinking?" But it was a lot of fun to put together, and it gave me a lot of respect for anybody trying to adapt anything ever. So
adaptations are hard.
It's
especially something as popular and convoluted as The Dark Tower.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be, even if they do a really good job, I'm sure there will be plenty of people who are going to be unsatisfied.
No, there's not a doubt in my mind. But here we go. I'm going to copy and paste these into the message threads. And actually, at the bottom of part 1 of that article, there's a link to part 2. So, I said it was fun to write, and it gave me a lot of appreciation for what they're trying to do in the movie. But frankly, at the end of the day, I just think that they shouldn't. The movie doesn't need to exist. I think that they're biting off more than they can chew, and they should have known a long time ago. All they're going to do is make people angry and make piles of money, so good on them. But again, I challenge them to prove me wrong. So, all right, again, way off topic. I'm reading the Dark Tower books. Those are still cool.
Yeah, you said the Archie stuff.
Yes, I've been reading Afterlife with Archie, which is pretty amazing. Have you read that by chance?
I know the premise. It's on my to-read list, but as someone who's not familiar with Archie at all and who has a to-read list that, I scroll and scroll down on my phone to get through the whole thing, it's not top of my list.
That's fair. But Afterlife with Archie is Archie meets The Walking Dead. It is Archie done seriously as a zombie comic book. Yeah. And it's really well done. It's really surprisingly well done.
There's also Archie meets Predator, which is great.
I haven't read those. I know that they exist. Archie meets Aliens, Archie meets Predator. Yeah, they're really supposed to be well done books. And since I liked Afterlife so much, I will have to find them and give them a try. But
I was going to ask, have you read any of the DC Rebirth stuff?
No, I stopped. The last DC stuff I read was the stuff leading up to the New 52. And that was around the time, this was, coming up on 10 years or 8 years ago or something now. Yeah. I got really, 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 really broke. And so I had to cancel all of my books. Yeah. And then I just heard such consistently terrible things about DC. I've read the first 2 books of Scott Snyder's Batman, the Court of Owls stuff. I really liked it. But I've heard, for the most part, a lot of it's pretty forgettable.
Yeah, I feel like Batman was, from what I've heard, consistently good. I didn't much like the Scott Snyder stuff personally, although I did read Zero Year that he did. Okay. That was pretty good. It's bonkers.
I've heard good things.
Actually. The Riddler nukes Gotham or something, and it's like this post-apocalyptic wasteland where Batman has to fight the Riddler.
That's pretty rad.
I want DC Rebirth to be good. I like the idea of it being because I hated the New 52. Okay. New 52 canceled all my favorite books. I'm a big Justice Society guy, and Booster Gold.
I love Booster Gold.
Who's my favorite character, and whose book got canceled, and he got put in a very dumb Justice League International New 52 book, which is terrible. So Rebirth, kind of getting rid of that. I read 2 books for this. Mm-hmm. Have you heard about New Superman?
No, I'm totally unfamiliar with the Rebirth stuff, honestly. So Educate
the
me.
2 books that I'm reading now for Rebirth are the 2 ones that, well, first of all, Greg Rucka has come back to Wonder Woman.
Yes.
And Wonder Woman has always been a character that I have wanted to like more than I've ever been able to get into.
Me too.
And Greg Rucka is really, really good.
I like him.
And he was part of the controversy we were going to talk about.
Yes.
He wants this book to be done right. And he basically was feuding with Frank Cho. Is that the name of the artist?
Frank Cho, yeah.
Yeah, who is this kind of infamous cheesecake cover artist who is very talented. And, you know, as a diehard pervert, I enjoy his art on a personal level. But he's just kind of a creep. Like, he keeps doing what Krista's mad at me. I'm not sure why. But maybe because I'm a creep. But he, you know, after the I'm a pervert, I am a pervert. After the Spider-Woman, what is it, Milo Manara cover art?
Yeah, that cover where her butt is doing things that butts don't do.
Yeah. He keeps doing these variant covers and like sketch covers where like he does it with basically every other female character in comics, and has Gwen, Spider-Gwen in the background saying outrage, just basically being like, you know, acting like any kind of outrage over the glaring misogyny in comics is just the result of people overreacting. Yeah. And he did this Wonder Woman variant cover, which he's been doing them for every issue of the new series. And apparently they had been feuding before. I don't know what Frank Cho was trying to do. I've seen his variant covers he had done before, and they didn't seem bad. And then I saw the 3rd one, and it seemed pretty tame too. But then I saw that they cut out about this much of the frame where it was a panty shot of Wonder Woman.
Right.
And Greg Rucka was just like, no, we're not doing this. Stop it. And then he quit, citing fucking censorship and being a big giant baby about it.
Yeah. There's this whole thing out there, this perception, I think, with it. I feel like a lot of these, a lot of these types that feel like masculinity is being stripped away. And those of you, anyone who's listened to my podcast with Natasha, I'll occasionally bring this up. Men's issues is a big thing for me, but so often it gets conflated with men's rights, and so I never get to talk about it, and I just tend to keep my mouth shut on a lot of it. But I think that there's this whole group of people out there, and a lot of it is just rooted in serious misogyny, who believe that there's this whole like silent majority out there that's totally agreeing with them. And the internet gives them their chance to kind of speak their mind and let them feel like the people are going to rise up behind them. And I feel like that's kind of what Frank Cho is doing. Like, I don't know how you can look at that stuff. Now, you can say you're being prudes, and I don't know. I keep wanting to try and say I can see it from their point of view, and I just can't. I'm sorry. We've come too far for that bullshit anymore. We just have. Yeah. We just have. I like a good cheesecake shot.
It would be one thing if like this was like kind of the, you know, pervy little corner of the DCU, and this is the funny, sexy book.
Sure.
But that's every superhero comic. Like, I feel like Marvel is marginally better than DC on it at the moment.
At the moment.
I mean, but they're the ones who had that fucking Spider-Woman cover. Like, they still make movies like this. Yeah. I mean, talk to me when there's the trope on TV tropes, the most common superpower, which is having amazing, gigantic breasts.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you treat that as a superpower, it is the most common one, because 95% of all female characters in comics, whether they're over-sexualized or not, just have giant breasts that are just always all up in your business.
And some of them, like Rogue, for example, they get bigger over time. Their bodies have this amazing shape-changing ability where they just get bustier and bustier, and they randomly spout pouches, and suddenly, I don't know. And then Grant Morrison happens, and it all goes away. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can't talk about the Grant Morrison run on X-Men because I'll go off on a rant. I do not like that run. I'm one of the only people.
Well, okay, and as Krista points out, the boobs getting bigger over time. Okay, yes, sure, but there's matters of degree. I think it's the matter of degree that I'm talking about. Yeah, it's so you're not a fan of the Grant Morrison X-Men?
No.
I haven't read the whole run. I just read bits and pieces of it.
Well, read it all the way through, like I did, after being told for years that it's the best run, and then get to the end where you realize that Grant Morrison may have wrote some of the better, some of the better stories in X-Men in the last several years. He also wrote two of the worst X-Men stories ever.
Okay, I never got to the end of it, honestly. So
yeah, Frank Quietly is an artist I'm kind of hot and cold on, and I enjoy his later work a lot more than his early work. I don't think any of the art in that run is good at all.
Okay,
but that's more of the personal taste as far as that goes.
But art can sink it. I know you and I think, had a very, very short conversation, maybe on Facebook, about the new Power Man and Iron Fist book. And I just couldn't. I picked up the first issue because Iron Fist is one of my favorite, like, C-level heroes. And I just couldn't get past the art. I just couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. And we just got linked to two different Tumblrs having to do with
I will follow those with the Let's Goin. Actually, I don't know if I will, because it might take me off this. I'll do that later.
Yes.
The other book I was going to talk about from DC Rebirth is New Superman.
Yes. So lay it on me.
This book is Superman. New 52 Superman is dead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The weirdest that you shouldn't be. He had a stupid costume, but for that matter, the current. I'll give me a second. So New 52 Superman is dead. He died after having a pretty decent run where he was like a man of the people. He got somewhat depowered, and he was like fighting cops who were overly aggressive.
So it's like Superman, like back in the 30s?
Kinda, a little bit. He wore a dumb t-shirt, but other than that, it was a not bad run. But anyway, he died. He supercharged his powers, and he's dead now. But the post-crisis, like, John Byrne, the classic, not classic Superman, but that post-crisis Superman, the one who died that one time, the Superman.
I know the Superman.
He is Superman now, because it turned out he survived the New 52 happening.
Huh.
So current Superman is like that Dan Jurgens, John Byrne Superman from the 80s and 90s.
Really?
But he's like pretending to be the normal Superman. It's weird.
I'm confused, but okay.
But new Superman, that's not new Superman. That's old Superman. That's, current Superman.
Interesting.
New Superman is Chinese. This all takes place in, I think, Shanghai. Shanghai, this shadowy shield type organization, has found the means to replicate Superman's powers. They got his DNA sample, and so they give it to this Chinese kid.
Lady Superman.
They give it to this young teenager who was seen. He kind of went viral after standing up to a Chinese supervillain and throwing a can at him. And then they were like, "Yeah, you'll work as Superman." And so this is him. He has a pretty cool costume, I think. I like it a lot, actually. It's very different.
Huh, okay. Actually, when you flash it real quick up at there, did you ever read Superman Red Son?
Fuck yeah, I did.
It's one of my
best thing Mark Miller ever wrote.
Yes, it's really. And for a second, I thought it was like, is that the Red Son Superman? I thought that was like, is that a Russian communist utopia Superman?
Now this character's name is something. He's definitely got a name.
That's important.
But I am bad with names. So and also apparently the best book that DC put out this week was called The Colonel Corps, which is a Crisis on Infinite Earths style multiversal story about the Colonel from KFC.
Does it have Daryl Hammond Colonel and Norm Macdonald Colonel and that cartoon Colonel that they had for a little while?
I think that's kind of the joke that they're playing on, and the cover is an homage to the first issue of Justice League International, which is maybe my favorite comic cover ever.
Okay.
Where Guy Gardner is saying you want to make something of it.
Yeah.
So I am looking forward to that. I keep not finding his name. It is Keenan. Kenan. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, because it makes me think of Keenan and Kel. But yes, this was a very good first issue. I am a very picky person when it comes to first issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it, and I'm really looking forward to being able to read a Superman book. Because I really like Superman. It had a little bit of a Batman Beyond feel to it, too. He reminded me a little bit of like a Terry McGinnis film.
Nice.
So that's good. And Wonder Woman, right now, they just started. It's one of the ones that's bi-monthly. Okay. And every other week they swap story beats, which is I don't like that. So
there's two stories going simultaneously?
Yeah, and it's every other issue, which I don't like. I get that they're trying to keep it to where it's coming out twice a month.
Are they different creative teams?
Greg Rucka is writing both, but it's a different artist. So that's why they're doing it.
That feels unnecessary. Okay.
The first issue, that story beat is like something to do with Wonder Woman going to Africa, I think, and she's dealing with Cheetah, which was just that issue was fine. But this second one is Wonder Woman Year One, which actually this was a very good issue, so I recommend it.
All right. Well, like you said, Wonder Woman for me is always one of those people that I know I ought to like, and I just can't. I've never been able to engage with it. I've never, I really. I want to. I want to. So please keep me informed, because that's something. Yeah.
I liked the first creative team that did the New 52 Wonder Woman.
Okay.
They did completely different stuff. They changed her origin and everything, and I thought it was pretty interesting. There have been some schools of thought on it, being that they really changed up how the Amazons worked.
Yeah, they kind of changed it from like a utopia to a dystopia, didn't they?
Yeah, which some people, and I think rightly so, pointed out that kind of takes away from the, feminist, themes of the original, origin, which I agree with that, but I also thought just story-wise and the characters that were in it and kind of the very Greek mythological themes of it, I thought were interesting enough that I still would recommend it. I thought it was really cool.
Good to know. Something else, I don't know how much you read into the non-standard Marvel DC stuff, but
I usually get those in trade if it's something independent.
Well, they resurrected after I just assumed this was dead in the water, but Brian Bendis is Scarlet. Have you read this?
I don't know about is Scarlet like a spy thing?
No, Scarlet it's a vigilante book, but it is one of the angriest comic books I've ever read. Basically, it is about a young woman named Scarlet who she's the victim of a crime at the hands of a police officer. Her and her boyfriend. She's shot in the head. Her boyfriend is shot and killed. She goes into a coma. She wakes up. She finds out that the cop who did it, they put it together as this cop stopped a notorious drug dealer, and good for him. He got a promotion, and she kind of snaps. And so she decides that she's not going to take it anymore. And she goes and finds this cop who's, he's got a drug habit. He's dirty as hell. He's all this stuff. She tracks him down. She exposes all of this stuff. And then she just straight up murders him. And she puts all this stuff out there on blast on the internet and says, yeah, this is who this guy was. By the way, my name is Scarlet, and yes, I killed him. And she then finds the police chief, who not only knew what was going on, but is the guy who gave him the promotion. He just hoped the problem would go away. And she says, you did this to him, and you aren't going to, if you don't hold him accountable, I'm going to kill you too. And she just goes, it's all very real. It's not done in like a Punisher style anything. And every time that she kills one of these people, she puts all their dirty laundry out there on the internet, and she's not shy about it. And essentially, it's kind of the story of the start of the next American Revolution. And she starts holding all the politicians accountable and all of the people who are in charge who could be stopping this and are choosing not to, because it's not the way the system works, or it's the way it's always been. And she holds them accountable. Not, I'm going to vote you out of office. I am going to murder you. And you start to see the people get behind her. And everybody, and it's everyone in power just goes like, what the hell? This is, how are they not seeing that this woman is a murderer, a multiple murderer? And it turns out the people really don't want to take it anymore. And you essentially, it's only about 10 issues in. The first 5 issues were from like 3 years ago. She did not get raped by the cop. It said it was just an attack. But yeah, it really is. And she just attracts this whole cabal of people who have gone through similar things when they're in positions of power where they have just been told to deal with it and move on. And, you know, there is someone who was abused and they just say, well, you know, let's just let this go away because this person was kind of important and maybe it's not what you say it is. And she just they all sort of rallied to her cause, and you see this disgruntled populace taking on this very, very real feeling, you know.
Yeah, that seems especially relevant now.
It is, and we even say part of the reason it took so long to come back. He goes like, I kind of didn't want to write the book because it was so hard to write because this feels like exactly what is going on outside. And it started, I think, in 2011, I think, were the first 5 issues. And that wasn't a time when this stuff was so front and center. And now it is. It was very pressing. And the whole book is narrated by Scarlett talking to the reader directly. And so like all the things that are captions, they're in little square boxes, but they've got a little voice bubble, voice like, you know, arrow pointy thing also. And so she's making you complicit in everything that you read. You know, she's actually talking to you and kind of seducing you into this side of it. So you are kind of an active participant in everything that is going on. It's really well done. I know Bendis is kind of a divisive writer. I like him a lot.
He is very hot and cold for me. He's written some of my absolute favorite books, and then sometimes he really kind of shits the bed.
Yeah, and I can't say otherwise. I had heard that actually just got optioned for a movie or a TV show or something, but it's, I know what hasn't, right? But it is a phenomenal book, and it's such an angry book, and it's such a well-crafted book. I can't get enough of it, honestly. But unfortunately, they just did issues 6 through 10 at the end of issue 10, which I think was out last month. They say, see you next year. And so I guess that's all they're doing on the book for the rest of the year. And we'll come back later with it. But it's very cool. It's very socially conscious.
Yeah, that seems like something that would be very hard to write.
I think so. And I think that I feel like they've nailed it, but it is very Bendis-y. So if you have a problem with the rhythms of his dialogue or some of that stuff, that's usually not my problem with him. Like, Ultimate Spider-Man is one of my touchstone books, like one of the books that brought me back to comics. In one of the many times I had gone away. Yeah, Ultimate Spider-Man is amazing. That's not supposed to be a pun, but yeah,
it's not quite a pun.
Okay, good. It's
only mostly a pun. Okay, I don't know how soon you need to get out of here.
That's coming up on 11:30 my time.
Okay.
So my girlfriend's probably in the other. In fact, she's probably there because she was logged in watching earlier. She's probably in the other room waiting to talk to me.
Yeah, just rubbing her nails on the coffee table.
Oh no, I have no doubt that she's keeping herself plenty busy. But yeah, no, we should probably end it sooner rather than later.
Okay, well, we'll have to do this again because we didn't even get to talk about your love of board games, hardly.
Yeah, I have a massive, massive board game collection. I'm a big fan, and I could talk about them forever. So totally.
Yeah,
totally.
I like Catan. That's my one board game.
Hey, there you go. And there's nothing wrong with Catan. There's a lot to love in Catan.
Yes, and Catan is the game of kings.
And that is horse racing, but okay. But no, Catan is a game that you can just play Catan. Some people do. You know, that's something that you can play over and over and get your strategy to get really entrenched in it. But there's a whole world out there. Most people have no idea. But starting with Catan for like the last 20 years, there's been a board game renaissance. There's an amazing number of games. Sport of Kings. Yeah, okay. All right, I take it back. Shame on me for getting smart for a second.
Horse racing isn't the Sport of Kings either.
I think it is. I don't think I made that up.
They call it that, I'm sure, but that's no.
So next, you're going to tell me boxing is not the sweet science? Come on, man.
I'm fine with that. This is
facts.
I don't watch much in the way of sports, but the only ones that I enjoy watching are boxing and golf.
Those are different.
Those
okay.
are very golf is a good
I
one
can't
to just
even
like
realize
lounge and just kind of like watch aimlessly. And boxing is a good like watch it in the bar sort of sport.
Fair enough.
But I don't know if I've shown you my $250 custom Catan board, but I will link you the pictures of that later.
That's a lot of Catan board. Wow.
It was a custom. It's like, wood cut, and all the pieces are like jigsawed together, and it's
fancy.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, Amanda and I just picked up the 10th anniversary Ticket to Ride edition. Are you familiar with Ticket to Ride at all? Okay, Ticket to Ride is it's one of our favorites. It's super easy to learn. There's a lot of depth to it. It's hard to explain in a way that sounds interesting because it's about building train routes across the country.
That's what I thought it was. I thought it was about trains.
Yeah, but it really is. It's way better than that, I promise. But yeah, they just came out with the 10th anniversary that it's in a giant box, and it's got painted trains, and it's super cool, but it's also $100. And so I've not the first $100 board game I've invested in. And I totally understand the desire for a $250 Catan board.
It was a graduation gift.
Oh.
And because that's something I did with my family quite a bit with my grandparents. We played that all the time.
Oh, nice.
And I've since bought the pewter sets that are civilization themed. Ooh. Egypt, China, Bavaria, and Vikings. And
that's
Natasha has painted them and everything. So at this point, it's a very expensive, very nice set of Catan pieces.
That's pretty awesome. See, I feel like we should play board games, but now that Natasha's mom lives in Colorado, we no longer have. There's any reason for you guys to come east. So
yeah, because even if we went up north, it would probably be to Pennsylvania.
Well, but Pennsylvania's like a 3-hour ride, which is doable. Yeah. Which is doable.
Well, Maggie lives in New York, so that's not exactly on the way either.
Yeah, and I also don't know Maggie, and so I think if I showed up at her door, there might be some questions.
Oh, Maggie would be cool with it. I'm just going to invite us all to Maggie's house.
I am in Connecticut. I am near Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's but no, I think that especially if you guys grew up with Catan, there's a lot of great games out there. Ticket to Ride, Power Grid. There's some very, very cool stuff that I think you would like just as much.
You ever played Merchants of Venus?
I have not played Merchants of Venus. I have wanted to, but it's one of those 4.5-hour games. And up until recently, it was out of print for forever. But
that's a fun game. It wasn't that long when I played it.
No, okay. That's always what I've understood.
For 3 players, I think it was only like 2 hours, maybe less than that.
Okay.
And very fun game. One of those ones that takes a long time to set up, I think.
It's on my list. It's on my list. And actually, there's a Firefly board game that's apparently very close to Merchants of Venus. It's very sort of pick up and deliver style. Mm-hmm. And that's been on my radar recently because we just finished watching Firefly. Not that I have the money to buy anything new right now, but it's that's sort of running around space finding different goods and the right place to sell the goods, and all that stuff is way up my alley. So someday
well, this was fun.
This was a lot of fun. I'm so glad you asked.
We were not able to get to Underdog Redemption, but as it turned out, it was fine that we didn't, because my underdog character I was going to try and sell you on was the Terry Sloan Mr. Terrific, who was actually talked about at great length in one of those Secret Convergence on Infinite podcast episodes.
Yes, I was just going to say, I just heard somebody go on at length about Mr. Terrific.
And I was basically going to give a very similar speech to that guy. I think that was Gary Lactus who talked about Terry Sloan.
Oh, I think so. And he's one of those guys with a great name who I just look and go like, so what is your deal? Did you just decide to get a name? I don't know. He found the name and came up with a superhero idea after, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this was a lot of fun. I will let you go. I appreciate you for coming in and filling in for Maggie and for being available and everything. And,
anytime. I hope I get to do it again.
For sure. I'd like to have every co-host of Unspoiled on here eventually, except for Brendan, because he won't answer my calls.
Okay, I'm not touching that.
I probably should stop making that joke. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. We'll definitely have you on. I wanted this to be a consistent thing. So, you know, both Maggie and I sometimes have things come up. So there will be little bonus episodes like this from time to time. So, all right. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. I didn't think we were going to have anyone for a while, but we had a good turnout here. And,
yeah, no, definitely.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And we will be back next Saturday around the same time, hopefully. Just stay tuned to the Facebook and Twitter profiles for more information on that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
Bye.